ultimately, thinking back to it, it just reminds me of that theme that's been coming up for us lately. It's just, let's not worry about what should be or what would be the right way to do it. Let's just worry about what actually what is, and let's deal with that. And when I look at it, suppose all that had gone well and you were at Google right now, then nobody would be listening to this right now.
You're listening to Side Hustle Pro, the podcast that teaches you to build and grow your side hustle from passion project to profitable business. And I'm your host, Nicaila Matthews Okome. So let's get started. Hey guys, it's Nicaila here, back with another special episode of Side Hustle Pro. I have a special guest with me on this episode, as you can probably tell from the title. Hello. It is my husband, Muoyo Okome.
It's about time.
Oh, stop. Okay. So for all my new listeners, shout out to y'all. Thank you. I'm so glad you found me. I haven't really done an episode where I take you back through my own journey in a while. And I actually received a question the other day, and the person said, hi, I love how you interview Black women who have taken their side hustles and turned them into profitable businesses. Would love to hear you put yourself in your own guest chair and talk about your entrepreneurial journey, lessons learned, and I'm curious to hear your answers to the lightning round. So say no more. I am going to be sharing my own journey, and I thought what better way to share more about Nicaila than to tell you a little bit about the Okome Family Hustle, because it's a family hustle now, right?
That sounds like a good idea. Shout out to
you know who you are. And I want to start off by introducing my husband, because he is my partner in life, love, and business, and we are walking this path of entrepreneurship together.
100%.
Yeah, a lot of people have heard us share our story individually or together, but in small snippets when we used to do Facebook Live sometimes back in, what was that, 2016, 2017?
It was well received, but
we just couldn't stick to it.
Yo.
And I don't think we've ever sat down to comprehensively share who we are, how we met, what makes us click as entrepreneurs, and how we both came to be entrepreneurs. But actually, I should say side hustlers turned entrepreneurs. That's what the show is about. That's the path I traveled. That's the path Muoyo traveled. And I mean, what are the chances two side hustlers turn entrepreneurs who meet and get married, right? So today's the day that we break it all down. So the first thing I thought we should talk about is, how did we meet?
All right. Okay. That's a good one.
Oh, you know what? Before we get into that, tell the people a little bit more about who you are. Who is Muoyo?
Okay,
what does he do?
For sure. My name is Muoyo Okome. I am the husband of Nicaila Matthews Okome. So for the last, let me say 7 or 8 years, I've been involved in the mobile apps world. I develop mobile apps. I have a team that helps me do that. Then in addition to that, I've started to help other people to get in the game. I recently wrote a book. Shout out to my editor, Angela Clements Johnson, who helped me with the book.
Shout out to Angela.
Apart from that, I recently dropped the Game of Grow podcast.
What's that about?
So Game of Grow follows my entrepreneurial journey, and it's different from a lot of podcasts out there because it's just sharing the experiences that I go through as an entrepreneur. It's real, it's raw. We talk about wins. We like wins, but we also talk about the losses. We talk about the lessons. And I'm just trying to share things that are very actionable that people can actually use. So that's my main goal. So I think you've done a great job with this podcast from the messages that we see every week, right?
Of course. At Muoyo, fun fact, was also a Podcast Mogul student. So Podcast Moguls is my podcast accelerator program that I started in January of 2018, and it's been going wonderfully. I coach and train emerging podcasters to launch and scale their own podcast. So Muoyo actually had a podcast before. It was how should we describe it? I don't know, but let's just say that Game of Grow is just
it's the evolution.
It's the evolution. It's the evolution.
Earlier on, I had said that the previous podcast, Daily Spark, died, that it was dead. I recorded a eulogy for it. Then my mom called me while we were on the way to the airport, and she was like, I need to change the language. So it's an evolution.
It's an evolution. But you've approached it with a more strategic mind.
more strategery. And I think that you were actually surprised at the way when I was going through Podcast Moguls that I actually went through it line by line.
Yeah, he was like, when he fully, commits his attention and focuses, like he becomes like super student. So, of course, he's my husband. We live together, and he every second like has a question, and I'm like, sir, if you don't go back to the module.
Right. So guys in the community, I'm still a little bit salty that I didn't get special attention. So, I want you to
You did get special attention. I just also directed you back to the content that I created.
So I want you to talk to Side Hustle Pro on Instagram and tell her.
Oh my God. Moving right along. So now let's get into how do we meet now that you know a little bit more about Muoyo. So how did we meet? You want to tell that story?
Do you want me to tell the real story, or do you want to tell your story?
Here we go again. I am going to take this one because Muoyo is... So I'll tell you why he says it's not the real story. So anywho, we actually met on Facebook. Shout out to digital platform, social media.
Do you remember when you weren't supposed to talk to people online?
I know,
because they were going to put you in a body bag?
No, I don't remember that. That's kind of morbid.
Well, that's what I was told.
I don't think that time has ended. I think that could still happen.
All right, moving on.
So this was back during the time when I was, I just joined this program called Management Leadership for Tomorrow, MLT for short. And it prepares underrepresented minorities to get into the top business schools in the country. So by preparing you, and it's like an 18-month process. Muoyo actually went through it as well. Mm-hmm. And as I was in that program, we had this assignment to reach out to people. Every month we have these homework assignments. And one of them was to like reach out to people who are currently in the schools you are interested in, to just get to know what their experience is like so that you can make an informed decision about B school. So one night I was just on Facebook, just scrolling endlessly. You know how that goes. And I came across a friend of mine was tagged in this album about the Wharton Africa Business Conference. And I kept seeing this smiling face that looked kind of familiar. And so after a while, I just started, you guys know me, I've already told you that I'm a social media stalker. So I finally click on this face and start like poking around his profile a little bit. And I'm like, oh, this guy seems interesting. He's at Wharton. He's very involved. He's leading this major conference. He was like, I could tell from the album that he was leading the Africa Business Conference. And I was like, he would be a good person to talk to for my homework.
I bet he would.
So I sent him a Facebook friend request. And he accepted within like 5 seconds. Wow. it was very quick. Yeah. It was very quick. And because it was so quick, I was like, whoa, I should probably send him a message so he understands why I friended him, so he doesn't get the wrong idea. So I sent him a message to say like, hey, I'm in MLT. I see that you're in MLT, because from his profile, I could see that he did it also. So I told him, how I'd be interested in talking to him about the business school experience. And that's how it began. What happened next?
So we definitely exchanged a few messages back and forth.
Right.
You remember at that time?
It was December.
So
you were still...
I was about to travel.
You were about to travel, but you were about to come home for Christmas break first. So at the time I was living in New York. He's also from New York. So he was coming back home to New York, and we decided to meet up.
Yes.
For...
Yes, we're gonna have a little meeting.
Yeah. So first it was supposed to be coffee, but then he was like, he doesn't drink coffee.
Right. I do now. I drink a lot of coffee now. It's crazy.
Now. So we decided to make it dinner.
Right.
So we did. Yeah.
It's logical.
Very logical. So we met up. We actually started at Max Brenner in, those of you from New York know, it's over by 14th Street. And that ended up being full. So we're like, let's go around the corner, have some Thai food. So we go around the corner. And mind you, this is the first time we're meeting, and we're having dinner over like in this dimly lit restaurant, having my favorite Thai food. So I didn't care. I was like focused on my pad Thai. But the craziest thing happened is, okay, from the minute we met, maybe because it was never meeting under the pretense of like a date, a blind date, nothing like that. I was completely 100% comfortable with him. I felt like I'd known him my whole life. We talked. How long did we talk that night?
Sure, it was definitely a few hours.
And we realized we had a lot in common. So that was the beginning of our journey.
Indeed. And then shortly after that break, then I was headed overseas. I had that trip to the Middle East.
Yep.
And over that whole thing, we stayed in touch over BlackBerry.
Yeah, back in the day, BBM. But what's interesting about this is we met during the time that Muoyo was in his second year of business school at Wharton, and I was getting ready to begin the process of even applying to business school. I hadn't applied yet. I'd just gotten into MLT, and I hadn't even taken the GMAT yet. And our path would intersect, and we'd have so much in common later that we wouldn't even know about them. So just to give you an example, okay. So when I met you, we got to know each other, and then next thing you know, it was that spring, like the spring that you're about to graduate from Wharton. And what was going on at that time? I didn't even realize the half of what you were going through at that time.
I was trying to get a job.
Yeah.
And I was not being very successful with it. I went on all the interviews, got my hair cut, did the intense study, and they just really weren't feeling me that much.
What kind of job?
I was going for the consulting jobs. I was thinking that my path, what I wrote for my business school essay was that I was going to go into consulting, then I was going to study different industries for 3 to 5 years, and then I was going to go do my own thing. And it looks like that wasn't really meant to be because, I probably went on about 30 different interviews and got 0 jobs.
And I had no idea. It was that early phase when you're getting to know someone. It's just like a whirlwind romance. And he would not really show any stress. He was in Philly, I was in New York. So when I would visit, it would be all good times, parties, yada, yada. I had no idea how stressed he actually was. And since I hadn't been through it yet, I also just didn't have a perspective of what that probably is like.
Yeah, it's hard for me to remember right now, looking back, just because it's so long ago. But it's hard for me to place that timeline with when we met and what was going on. But that definitely would have been happening around the same time.
Yeah, I definitely remember it. And at that time, here's what was going on with me. So I was working at the time for this company called Ideally. It was my first job in social media marketing. This was back in 2011. I started it in 2010, actually. So shortly before me and Muoyo met. And it was the first time I ever had a role. My role was social media assistant, or I don't even remember, specialist. And this was right when people started taking social media seriously as a job, even though it was still hard to explain to my parents what the hell I was doing all day. It was my first role where I was like, oh, wait a second, I can actually do social media for a living. So I'm working in this place. It's a startup company, which I didn't even really understand what a startup was. I was just looking for a job that I liked at the time. And I was also starting to think about, okay, this, as a startup, it's pretty much a little bit of hot mess.
Established companies are a mess too, man, to be honest with you.
True, but Ideally no longer exists, right? Those of you who are wondering what it is are probably like, what is that? Because it no longer exists.
Are they Ideal or are they just gone?
They moved to Ideal for a bit. They were acquired by Groupon, and I have no idea what happened after that.
Got it. Moving on.
So moving on. This was around the time I started realizing, okay, if I want to do this marketing stuff for real, I need some kind of true business understanding of how to connect the creative stuff I'm doing on social media with results for a company. Otherwise, they're always going to look at what I'm doing as frivolous. And that would drive me crazy when I would put all this effort into something. And, people just kind of looked at it as, oh, that's nice. That's great. That's what you guys are doing on Facebook. Cool. You tweeted that. Cool. So that is when I started looking at business school. And then I just started thinking about, okay, what do I need to do? All I was focused on is what do I need to do to get in?
Indeed. All right. So do you want to talk about...
So then you got a job. Then you finally got a job. What job was that? How did you... I say it like that, but it was before you graduated.
Yeah. So I was super excited about that. Definitely went out and bought some champagne. I got a job with Microsoft at the time, working as a quote-unquote business manager. I was...
Whatever that means.
It meant that I was going to work with a lot of spreadsheets. I was very excited about it at the time. And just ready to get going.
So he gets this job in Washington, D.C. and moves there, I was excited for him, glad he didn't end up somewhere like Chicago or whatever, and that we weren't flight distance away from each other, but also like, dang, it used to just be a 2-hour distance. Now it's a 4-hour distance.
Right.
And around that time, that was in 2011. Fast forward to 2012, further into the search for business school process. At this point, hating my job. I shouldn't say hating, but had outgrown it. Had outgrown it because at a startup, you start out doing one thing and then you do a million other things, and you feel like you go through it more quickly than a traditional company. So was ready for a change. And at the time, I had moved back home with my parents because, New York City rent. And, and I had this boyfriend in D.C. So I thought, why don't I just move to D.C.? Since I'm looking for a job anyway, I'll look for jobs in New York and D.C. Right. And that's how I wound up in D.C. because I got a job at Georgetown I was the assistant director of marketing, which was just a very fancy title that really pushed my resume up a few notches.
You remember when I gave you the talk before that?
Right. So before
you're Michelle Obama.
Before that interview, obviously it was in DC, so I went to stay. I'm staying with Muoyo for the weekend into the Monday when I had the interview. And I was so intimidated because the title was Assistant Director of Marketing. And I was going from social media assistant / specialist to Assistant Director. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get this. And me and Muoyo had a talk and he gave me this big pep talk, which we both still remember because I had like one of my biggest cases of imposter syndrome ever. And with that was one of those first moments where I realized that when you walk into a place and you do your power pose, like I did my power pose before that interview in the bathroom, and you truly just go in there with an attitude that like, I could get this. I'm qualified. They brought me in here for a reason, that you can get it. So never, ever, feel like you're not qualified, especially if they brought you in for an interview.
Yeah. I mean, something I probably shared during that I always talk about that my mom gave to me is, so there's this Yoruba proverb. My family's Nigerian. My mom's side is Yoruba. And there's a proverb, well, not really a proverb, but it's a piece of wisdom that my grandma used to say, which is, does he have two heads, right? So it's just to say like anything, if somebody succeeded, then you can do it too. So that's how I feel. And that's how we feel, that's how we feel.
Exactly. So now, how did that apply when you were actually at Microsoft? So tell us about that experience.
Oh, man, so much to say. Where do you want to start with that?
Well, you get this new job. So at this point, we're both living in D.C., me in my own place in D.C. proper, him in Arlington. And I never really understood what actually your job entailed. Can I say that? I knew it involved spreadsheets.
Yeah, I mean, more or less. So, I was working for Microsoft in the public sector services, so working for the government. So there's a branch of Microsoft that sold products to the government, and then the part that I work with would help the government to use those products properly. And then I was basically working in the back office, supporting people who were in the field. So doing a whole bunch of running numbers, looking at spreadsheets, and working with the general manager. So it was pretty boring.
And fun fact about Muoyo. So even during your summer internship, you do this thing where tell the people, when people say,
you're really going to expose me here.
I am. We got to talk about this. So, right. His jobs, he would have the kind of jobs where people are like, it's very flexible here. You can work from home if you want to. And, most people might take like a Friday, work from home. What was your interpretation of that?
I take these things very literally. And so it leads to me not being very, I don't advance much when it comes to the corporate world so if I figure out that I can be just as effective in terms of the actual work from home as I can from the office, then you're not going to see me in the office. And so I did that during my summer internship, and that probably didn't help as far as me, I mean, initially I came into the office, Initially I came into the office, and then later on, less so. And especially once I realized that I wasn't staying there, then...
and we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second. So Muoyo's working for Microsoft, and me, I'm now working for Georgetown. At the same time, I have this one-track mind because I'm in this MLT program, and I am on the track for business school. So I am taking the GMAT multiple times. I don't think we'll go down that road today because it was just too much money, too much time. So but also what was interesting about that is that I moved closer and we saw each other less. because I was studying for the GMAT every night after class.
I forgot all about that. That was frustrating. That was a frustrating time.
Right? It was a frustrating time. Moyo would go out on Friday nights and just come over after, because I was like, Friday night was going to be like one of my main times to study, and we could see each other on Saturday.
Right.
So that was crazy, because, you know, the whole reason I moved to DC was for us to spend more time together, and the GMAT completely took over my life.
Yeah, it didn't really work out that way.
Yeah. And then I started visiting schools. You know, once you start applying to schools, you're visiting schools beforehand. Then you are applying. So you're doing that whole draft after draft. It was a very stressful process. When I look back at it, I'm really thankful that I got through it. We got through it, because it was extremely stressful. It was a lot of work. But at the end of that tunnel of work, stress, tears over those GMATs. Ooh, tears. Moyo felt the tears.
Wow.
Oh, a funny story too. So Moyo I make fun of him because he studied computer science in Princeton, and this has nothing to do with most things.
Right.
But whenever I'm struggling with something, I'm like, come on, you did computer science. Like, help me with this. That could
honestly be the sink.
So he also is really good at standardized tests. So he took the GMAT once, blew it out the park. And that led me to believe that he could tutor me.
That went well.
That did not go well. The first time we sat down, I was like, oh, this is not going to work, because he would like calculate 15 steps in his head, and I would still be on step 2. Like, wait, how'd you get that?
Right.
So he did try to help me in the process, y'all, and support me. He just we have different styles, different working styles.
But we both have our strengths, and
we do.
Now we help each other on different things, so it's good.
And we'll get into that. Yeah. So there's a point of all this, in case you're like, all right, you guys, why are you still talking about what you did? So we will get to our lessons. The reasons we're sharing this story is because these experiences that we went through have made us who we are, both individually and as a couple. And I think knowing that will explain a lot about who we are. So I finally get into Michigan. I had some reservations at first because of the distance. I was like, oh man, can we do this? But I really love Michigan. So I was like, there's no way I wasn't going to go there because of a man. I was like, if it works out, then it's meant to be, if we're able to do the distance. And it ended up, it worked out. But it was stressful too, right? Like, how do we survive that? We tried to do 3 weeks, not go more than 3 weeks without seeing each other.
Something like that. You know, I guess a good thing about that time is like, I think every 3 weeks or so we were able to travel.
Right. And we would alternate it. So if I went one cycle, then it was his turn to come to Michigan. Mm-hmm. And then of course we would have breaks, like, fall breaks or whatever. I didn't go on as many trips as some of my classmates. Like during fall breaks, I loved getting home to my family and my man. I also learned that I'm not really big on group trips. You have to know your traveling style. So that's a tip for B school too.
Right.
While I was in Michigan, you were starting to side hustle.
Yeah.
Tell us about that process. Okay. How did you start getting into apps? What did you do when you were first getting into it? And at what stage did you leave? Right.
Okay. So one thing that really helped out a lot was misery. At that point, I was miserable with my job. So I didn't feel like staying there was an option, right? So that really helped me have a lot of motivation to find something new. I didn't know whether that new thing was going to be the next job. I looked for a lot of those. I went to different career fairs. There was one career fair I found out about. It was a NSBE one. Mm-hmm. I spent about $2,000 because it was going to be the weekend right after I found out about it. So between the hotel, the flight, whatever, it cost a lot of money. But I just need to find something. I started heading to different opportunities online, just doing research on how to do online marketing, how to do this, how to do that, trying intensely to find something. And mobile apps was one of the things that I ran into. I saw this guy. It was a marketer who I was following for a while, and he started doing apps. He was doing pretty well with it, and I saw the kind of revenue he was generating, kind of time he was spending on it. And then it was interesting because he wasn't like a genius technical person. It wasn't the kind of guy you would expect to be doing this. So it intrigued me, and I was able to see that he was credible. So I said, okay, let me just pay attention, right?
What happened next?
So, after I've been following him for maybe 6 months and just watching the progress, he started offering a course. So by that time, I'm not sure how the 6 months overlaps with the time period we were just talking about, but when he offered the course, I jumped on the course, right? It was super expensive, but I knew that I needed something. So I said, okay, let this be my Christmas gift to me. And we're going to try this thing out. And if it works, incredible. If it doesn't, then it means that I just took a chance on myself and totally worth it, right? So I bought the course and I went through it, started learning about the mobile app world. And yeah, that's kind of how we got started.
So around the time that Muoyo was getting into this app world, I was trying to be the supportive girlfriend. But I don't know about y'all, when you are not really into gaming, and your man is, it's kind of like, oh boy, like what is happening here? You have this good job and you keep talking about these apps. Like what is up with these apps? So he slowly got more into this. And I told you before how when Muoyo is really into something, like his focus is on another level, like level 1,000.
Right. So the thing was, I saw the opportunity at the time. And what it was, so I was in this course and the person who created the course was creating games, creating apps. You know, some were apps, some were different, some were games. But he was making a lot of money doing this. And then...
What's a lot of money?
So he had lots of apps. He had maybe 15, maybe 20 different apps. And some of them were making 10 grand a month, right? 10 grand a month, 120 grand a year. That was more than I was making with one app. Some of them were making $5,000 a month. Some were making $800 a month. So, you know, it was like, it wasn't like he had Instagram, but he had a bunch of apps making decent revenue. They added together. And for a single person, you know, it's not like he had a whole bunch of different employees. He had some folks overseas who helped him to code them. And that was it. This is a really, really significant income. So that intrigued me. And I saw the people who also took the course. So when I first took the course, at first I just went through it and I wasn't doing anything. I just learned. A lot of us do this. We'll learn and we're not doing. But I noticed that there were other people that were doing, that were implementing, and they were putting things out, weren't the best things in the world, but they were making money. Some people were making $2,000 a month. Some people were making $4,000 a month. So I said, you know, wow, that's, you know, $4,000 a month. That's almost $50,000 a year. That's significant to me. I was making $100,000. That would be like a 50% raise. So I said, okay, I need to start acting. So that's when I started to actually go hire developers overseas, work on some different games, work on some different little apps, and just put things out in the market. You know, the first one I put out there, the first month, I tell people all the time, I made like $87, $81.78 or something like that. Yeah, that's the number. That's the number.
Which is still a little exciting to make money on the internet.
It was the moment that I saw, okay, this is working. You know, that was exciting because it's like, okay, if you can make $1, you could probably make 2. Why can't you make 10? Why can't you make 100? So, you know, I just started to think like that.
Hey guys, it's Nikayla here with a quick word from our sponsors. Special thanks to our sponsor, Grammarly. The other day, I wrote an Instagram caption that started with the sentence, "It's been a while." And I must have read that caption over at least 10 times before posting it. But it was only after the post had been up for, only 24 hours that I realized I made a spelling error. I spelled a while as one word rather than 2. If I'd only just copy and pasted that caption into Grammarly first, it would have caught it for me. I've decided that I am tired of trying to be my own copy editor, so Grammarly is my new writing best friend. Grammarly is a writing assistant that offers clear, effective, mistake-free writing across multiple devices, browsers, and apps. I have the plugin installed on my browser, and it pops up with writing corrections on everything from my newsletters to my show notes to my Facebook posts. So it's really convenient. I don't have to think about it. It's just always there to help me. So do yourself a favor and check out Grammarly so you too can type with confidence. Go to Grammarly.com/sidehustle to get 20% off your Grammarly premium account today. That's Grammarly.com/sidehustle for 20% off your Grammarly premium account. Hey, y'all. Second quarter of 2019 has officially begun. So tell me, what skill have you been meaning to work on that you haven't gotten to yet? Now is the time. And there's no better place than Skillshare to start learning and growing today. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators just like us. It has over 25,000 classes in subjects like photography, entrepreneurship, graphic design, writing, marketing, and even podcasting, you name it. I even created a course, and you can take it, my How to Start Your Own Podcast course. It's on Skillshare, so you can learn how to record, how to edit, how to publish your show, and get started today as a podcaster. Huge thanks to Skillshare for supporting Side Hustle Pro with a special offer just for you. You can get 2 months of unlimited access to Skillshare for free. So sign up, go to Skillshare.com/sidehustlepro, start working on your dreams today. That's Skillshare.com/sidehustlepro to start your 2 months free right now. One last time, that's Skillshare.com/sidehustlepro. How long was it between that first app? Because I can't remember, between that first app that was 87 to like apps that were making like a couple thousand.
Yeah. So the next month I made $1,000. So what happened is that once I saw, okay, this is real, like I can, I'll make money and they'll pay me in U.S. currency, American dollars, right? You see that happen, you say, all right, this is real. How do we make this more? So then I started getting into it. I started studying, okay, how do we make, what's limiting me right now is I only got 936 downloads. So how do we get 10 times or 100 times as many downloads? So I started studying the marketing, right? And looking at how do we get more downloads? And I started really working on that. So by the next month, got more and got better results and made $1,000. And at the time, that was right around what I was paying for rent. So, that's really significant, right? I mean,
having your rent covered by...
Yeah. It's not, okay, let me quit my job money, but it felt good. It felt good.
And so as he's doing this, I'm still kind of like, okay, that's cool. That's a nice side hustle. I love that you got that focus. You got that ambition about you. Never really knew where it would lead. And then he started making more and more money. And he would go to these conferences, the app conferences, the conference from the person who taught the course that he bought, that first initial course. And, I was just trying to be in the world, but I was really like an outsider, trying to be supportive. But I was this outsider who was like, what are you guys talking about? Not that I didn't understand it, but when you go somewhere like a conference that's devoted to something that you're not as passionate about, it could be a little hard at times. But I learned to love it because he loved it. I learned to support it and even, test out games and play games because he would be bummed out when he would get excited about something and I wasn't. And that's still something that we work on to this day because I want to support you. Right. But sometimes you're more excited than I am.
So that's one interesting thing. So just for the people out there is like, so even though we're both entrepreneurs, I feel like we have different Actually, we have the opposite personality.
We took the Myers-Briggs personality test.
Everything's opposite.
Had you taken it before, or like just you took it twice recently?
I took it twice, probably a year apart.
Okay, so I had taken it way back in college, and I've known my personality type. And sometimes he would be like, I don't believe in putting ourselves in boxes. Then he took Myers-Briggs and took it 2 times 1 year apart, got the same result. And we are the exact opposite personality type. Yeah. I'm an INFJ and he's a
ESTP. But I think my E could really be, it's borderline.
Yeah, it's borderline.
Yeah, I'm close to it.
Yeah. But it's been helpful to understand each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Because when you're an entrepreneur, what were you just saying? You were going to say like...
Yeah, we have different personality types and... I'm the person that I can't really turn it off. I'm always excited. I'll wake up wanting to talk about different ideas and different things in the business, and that you ain't that way.
I wake up and I want to meditate. I want to zen. I want to read my Bible and I want to journal. And sometimes if I come in the living room too soon and Muoyo's there, he'll be like, "Guess what?" And I'm like, does this have to do with Psalm 40? Like, what does this have to do with? Because I just came out to get some tea. He's like, but still, I've learned to be more excited because you know what? Like, if your partner is excited about something, that's exciting. If he's passionate about something, that's exciting. Even if like that's not something that, wakes you up every day, like it's still exciting to see him pursue his passion. So that's something that's been a great learning for us. So anyway, back to that part of the app space. So that's going on. Then you start making more money, and
that was around December.
What?
Yeah, that was like 6 months since.
December 2013.
2012, yeah.
2012. But when did you actually leave your job?
All right, so December is when it got real. December, by the end of that month, I made double my monthly salary outside the job. So then I started seriously thinking about it. I was going to collect another stock award that following September. So in December, I said, okay, let me stay until September. If things are still going well, then I'll leave in September, right? After a while, in January, after I started doing some more things, releasing some more apps, it was looking good. I said, okay, let's move the date up to June because June is my birthday. That'll be a great time to leave, celebrate the birthday, and we'll leave the job, blaze the glory. Amazing, right? Then around February or maybe March, I had an app. I had a game that went and hit the top 10. I was actually sitting inside a class that I was forced to go to. It was for project management. So they wanted, I had gotten demoted and put into this project manager position. So I had to go take this project manager class to try to get this credential. I'm sitting in the class, and at the time, my app is blowing up. It hit the top 10 in the App Store while I'm in this class that I was forced to go to because I wasn't useful to anybody, right? So while that was happening, and I started seeing the craziest numbers I saw in my life, so then my timeline then moved up from June to April. And I actually did end up leaving the job in April.
And I'm like, and I got the timeline a little confused. So I wasn't in business school yet when he quit, when he left to do his apps full time.
I
was about to leave my job too in June. And so I guess we did experience us both not working for anybody for a little bit before I went to B school. But I too was in that camp of telling you, like, why don't you just, keep making all this money on the side, pay off your loans, and then quit.
Right.
But because at the time I didn't truly understand what it felt like to just really not be appreciated somewhere and just be like ready. I wouldn't understand that till later. So
right.
I get it now.
And I think the biggest factor that made me do it is because I felt that I was constricting the growth of my business at that point by being at my job and not being able to devote my full self and my full time to the business.
Yeah. And that's something I experienced too, where I talked about it in my episode on why I quit is you reach a point where it's like, okay, I'm not making as much as I would want to be making to quit my job. But at the same time, if I'm making this much as a side hustle, imagine what I could do if I could give it my full effort. So that's that point where you really do have to make a choice.
Yeah. And I was making more money outside by a lot. And it was hard for me at that point to deal with the kind of, I guess, indignities.
Yeah.
Because you lose tolerance for that kind of thing when you don't feel that you need people.
Exactly.
So I knew that I had to leave.
And so he left, and then I headed off to business school. And while I was there, went through a lot of self-reflection and personal discovery, because once again, when you go through something like going to grad school, it's really, especially business school, getting your MBA, the whole goal is to get a job. The whole goal is from the minute you start writing your essays, really, you're supposed to have a story. You're supposed to have this why of why you're going to get your MBA and what you're going to use it to do. And what often happens is you have to come up with your story fairly quickly in the process because you're applying, the December before the August when you matriculate.
I just made up a story.
Right. We all make up a story. Let's be real. We all make up a story. So mine was about brand management, right? Because it was the closest thing to marketing. What happens too is that business school has these buckets that everyone kind of gets in where they fit in. So I was like, okay, cool. That one's marketing. I'm going to do brand management. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. So that's what all my essays were about, how I was going to be a brand manager. Interestingly enough, when I reread those essays now, I actually did talk about how I wanted to be a brand manager for a while and then start my own marketing consulting agency. So look at that foreshadowing. So although I'm not doing that exact thing, I did have like entrepreneurship as a far off goal.
You also kind of back to that Barbara Walters thing you talked about originally.
Yeah, that too.
Full circle, full circle.
Full circle. So anyway, well, back to the story. So that's my story. I was sticking to it. And what happens when you do that, though, is you start believing that story and you start going blindly in the direction of it without really taking enough moments to really ask yourself, okay, is this what I want to do? Why? Why am I doing this? How can I get to where I want to go? And business school is such an awesome opportunity that many of us squander because we're so focused on choosing a story, fitting in a bucket, that we don't take enough time out to go after our truth and therefore identify the resources that could help us and support that truth, even if it doesn't have a perfect job at the end of it, even if there's no blueprint from that truth to a job, because we're so focused on getting a job. So saying all that to say, I went in with the focus of getting a job. So much so that when I got into Michigan, I was awarded the Consortium for Graduate Study in Management Fellowship, CGSM.
Yeah.
Anyone going to business school who's an underrepresented minority should definitely check out cgsm.org. I'll link to it in the show notes. So got into with the fellowship, full tuition fellowship, by the way. So shout out to me for working my butt off. I got to shout myself off. I got to shout myself out real quick. So full tuition fellowship. And what happens when you go in through CGSM is not everyone receives a fellowship. So let me just put that disclaimer out there. It truly is merit-based. It's not awarded to everybody who applies to the consortium. But I was one of the fortunate ones to receive it. And everyone does go to what's called the orientation program. The orientation program, you get an early chance to recruit for companies for your summer internship. I interviewed there for a bunch of brand management and a bunch of, different marketing roles. I feel
like they were loving you.
Well, a little bit. They were loving me. Like, I got a lot of callbacks, but then the callbacks were not all as successful.
Okay.
So couldn't fake it till I make it in the last round, right? But I did end up getting an internship at Google, not for the marketing role that I wanted, but for ad sales. And at that point, my eyes were just like completely lit up, like with the Google brand, like, oh, this is awesome, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Done. I'm it. So I went into business school with an internship, which is a pro and a con, because the pro is like I could focus on my academics, which is something that I actually really went back for. I'd studied communication in undergrad, so I shied away from all math and all quant in undergrad, which was part of the reason the GMAT was so difficult. But now I realize I really wanted to feel confident in this space. So having an internship allowed me to focus on my classes a bit. But what it did was make me, again, back to this point of being lazy when we're just like, oh, this is my story and I'm sticking to it. It made me lazy to explore anything else. I was like, I already did what I came here to do. Check. I'm ahead of everybody in the game. I already got my job. So fast forward to summer 2014. It's finally time for that internship. And because Muoyo was an entrepreneur at this point, he actually came out with me to Mountain View, California, to live for the summer while I interned at Google. And how was that experience for you?
Oh, man. So California is beautiful.
Gorgeous.
The Bay Area is
gorgeous,
beautiful.
Yeah.
I didn't really, I don't really want to live there. I enjoy being on the East Coast more.
We are East Coasters, okay?
Our family's here, our people are here,
yeah.
so I'll leave it at that.
I will leave it at that. But anyway, so because we were out there, I had to rent a car for the summer. Oh my gosh, it's so expensive, you guys. So what I made for the internship, it almost practically all went to rent, plus renting a car for the summer. And, we had one car, and Muoyo would need it during the day, so he would drop me off at work every day. We got really close that summer. It was our first time living together, too. It was our first time, so it's kind of like a test, too. Like, can we do this? Can we do this living together thing? So it was first time living together, drove me to work every day, so we were just super spending a lot of time together. And I was going to this internship, and I'm so glad that Muoyo was there for the summer because I just had a really difficult experience. I mean, I was suffering from imposter syndrome because I think day 2 that I was there, one of the the senior people on my team. There are these Google certifications that you can do, which had nothing really to do with so they're ad certifications. So they show that you are proficient in the Google ad tools, the Google ad suite. And coming into the internship, it's not a requirement, but it's looked upon highly if you do it. So of course I was like, I'm going to do these certifications during the summer in addition to my job. And I think the second day in, one of the senior members of the team was like, well, last year's intern did it in like a weekend. So, expecting the same from you. And I mean, that was just that first shot of like, oh shit. Like, I don't even curse, but, just like, feeling like that. Of course, I always knew it was a competition and you're being evaluated against your peers, but it was almost kind of like I was already being told, like, we loved last year's intern, so we'll see if you can cut it. And maybe that's just me being my feelings. Again, I'm an INFJ, so I'm feelings all day. But that was like that first little chip against my confidence. And then every day that I went in there, I was the only Black woman on the team. And not to say that was a factor, because I don't know. You'll never know that for sure. But I always felt like I needed to show and prove. I always felt like that there was underlying feeling like, is this intern smart enough? Like, did we get a good intern this year? Like, the one we had last year was so awesome. You're making a face. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
You already know what I think.
No, I don't know. I don't know. The people listening definitely don't know.
Well, I don't know. I don't feel like you have anything to prove. Ultimately, you just have to show up, do you, and then let things be what they are.
Well, I felt like I had something to prove, and I was killing myself to try to take these certifications, plus try to complete this summer project that was just, it was like they gave me a problem that is still not solved to this day and expected me to solve it as a summer intern in 8 weeks. And looking back, I see how ridiculous that is, and how much I should have probably maybe challenged it a bit or worked to scale it down into something that was realistic, or manage the expectations in terms of like, instead of coming up with a solution, proposing next steps that could get you closer. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time now, thank goodness. I don't spend a lot of time trying to dissect that experience. But when I was living it, I mean, I was in my head like every day. Like I would come home frustrated. You saw me. Like I was staying up. You would go to bed. I was staying up trying to like work on stuff.
Yeah, I remember you would spend so much time trying to perfect different PowerPoints. And I just really wondered why you were doing that.
Well, my final PowerPoint was just deck that I was, that in addition to trying to solve the problem, putting it together into a deck. And I think trying to perfect it was my way of dealing with the anxiety, like if I could just get this to be perfect, the presentation will go better or what have you. So long story short, that was not the role for me. That was not the role for Nikayla. I didn't see it at the time, but all I had on me was also this feeling of I've got to get this job. Like that when you're in an MBA program, like getting a job is part of your value and part of how you're seen as successful.
Perception of value.
The perception of value, excuse me. Yeah, perception of value. So to me, I started to not only stress out about doing well, but also stress out about what I was going to tell my peers. Like, I have to get the job.
There's a lot of peer pressure. Yeah,
there's a lot of peer pressure.
Be the only person without.
Right. Yeah. People are asking you how the internship is going.
Where
Everyone's lying.
Where you gonna be,
As soon as you step foot back into school, day one, people are asking you, did you get the offer? And what do you say?
I was just as vague as possible.
I was definitely vague. What helped me at first was that Google actually did not give most people offers right away. They delayed it. I don't know if they still do that, but at the time, they didn't give it to you at the end of your internship like some companies do. So that helped me stall for a bit. Oh, we don't know yet. We're going to find out, in the fall.
Right.
And then they start giving people offers. People start finding out. And it's like I start panicking a bit. What am I going to say? I was actually on my fall break with Muoyo in Miami when they finally called me October to tell me if I got the internship. I mean, Y'all can guess what the answer is. You already know. The answer was a big fat no. So, of course, I collapsed on the bathroom floor. I'm so dramatic. I was like crying when we were just about to go get drinks on the strip. So you have to pick me up off the floor.
Yeah. Hey, that's how we bond.
That's how we bond. Me bawling, boo-hooing. I was more so angry and pissed too that they waited so damn long. I'm like, y'all could have got this over with. You did not have to stretch this out for 2 months.
Yeah. But ultimately, I think, thinking back to it, it just reminds me of that theme that's been coming up for us lately. It's just, let's not worry about what should be or what would be the right way to do it. Let's just worry about what actually what is, and let's deal with that, you know? And when I look at it, suppose all that had gone well and you were at Google right now, then nobody would be listening to this right now.
Nobody would be listening to this. I think about that too in terms of, one, not lamenting the past, not spending time like with the what ifs and what have you, because I truly do believe that there is no such thing as failure, but kind of redirection. And I wasn't meant to go down that path. I wouldn't be the woman I am today. There would be no Side Hustle Pro. Maybe I would be an entrepreneur somewhere down the line, like I wrote in my essays, but not right now. And I'm so happy with where I am right now. And I also really didn't want to move back to Mountain View.
Another thing that is deep for me is just that you really wanted to prove to them that you could excel at the game that you were playing there, which was like ad sales and making this PowerPoint and solving this particular problem, proving that you were analytical, whatever that means.
And helping them just serve people more ads. And getting people to buy more ads.
And whatever. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. Somebody's great at that, right? And that's their thing. But the fact is that, you're really good at other things. And we talked about that earlier today. So just, all of us have our own gifts. And if you put a monkey in a swimming race, right, they're probably not going to win that swimming race. But if they're climbing a tree, they'll be a professional at climbing the tree.
Exactly.
Right. So now that you're running your own race, I think that it's a lot more pleasurable and you're a lot more effective as well.
Yeah.
So,
and speaking of that, so another thing we talked about recently was I finally had an epiphany, and it occurred to me why I would get so pissed when people would tell me I'm not analytical enough, because the way it was said to me, it was like they were making a determination of my capabilities. And it's like, you can't, I'm capable of anything. Like if I put my mind to it, I can do anything. I just don't prefer to do certain things, right? I would rather be recording this podcast and making empowering content for the world and for Black women in particular than running a spreadsheet, right? Or creating a presentation deck. So that doesn't mean I'm incapable of doing that. I just don't want to do it. So recognizing that as well, not letting people put their judgments on you of what you're capable of, recognizing that just because you don't enjoy and or you could say that's not my ministry because I don't want it to be. That's not my calling. It doesn't mean I can't do it, but that's not my calling.
Yeah.
So now let's move into me graduating without a job. So as a result of me not getting that offer, I started exploring other paths. The reason why I was delayed in that is, again, because I was just hoping to get the offer at a big name company and figure it out later. I quickly realized that business school was not going to be this time where all of my life's purpose would be revealed to me, and then I would graduate in 2 years with all of life's questions answered. That was not going to happen. It could have happened if I had spent more time getting to know myself and what my passions were. And some people do that. And I really respect them. My roommate Media, for example, is one of those people who really took the time to take deeper life-changing classes and challenge herself in ways and just completely reinvent herself. And my roommate Stephanie as well. So if I had done that, I probably would have been closer to where I am now, but I didn't. So explored some other jobs, the typical like brand management type of things, graduated without a job, and ended up moving back home to DC with Muoyo.
So what were you thinking around that time when that was going on?
So number one, I was definitely very ashamed and embarrassed. I was jealous of my peers that had jobs, and I thought that they would think less of me for not having a job. I was so worried about what other people thought. again, looking back, I, just want to shake myself like, who cares? And who is anyone else? And if there's someone who you really think will think less of you, like those are not your friends.
Yeah.
So that's what I would tell, Nikayla in 2015. But at the time I was just so deep in my shame. I actually studied abroad the spring of my second year, so January through March, and it was nice to get away from all that MBA pressure. It really was. It gave me some time for self-reflection there as well. And when I graduated, I finally really started opening up to people besides my roommates about, searching and not having a job, and was able to find some trusted confidants that I didn't feel looked down on me. Some of my Ross classmates even like helped me tighten up my resume, tighten up my cover letters, were sending me role after role. I started applying for jobs. And then what ultimately occurred to me is this thing we're talking about earlier, which is choosing yourself and making your own job. Now, when I say choosing yourself, I mean, after lots of rejections and people telling me I wasn't this or that, or they went with someone else who was more this, I decided, you know what? I'm going to create my own job. I don't have a job yet, but I'm going to start doing the things that I want to do. So that's when I started my blog again. And at first I started blogging about marketing and industry topics, online marketing, because I knew that would get me closer to a job. But then it really transitioned into this whole space of interviewing people. It didn't start out with Black women entrepreneurs, but it transitioned to that too.
What was that click that made you transition to Black women entrepreneurs?
The click was when I was doing my interviews, I just was gravitating more towards some of the women I knew who were side hustling and who were doing this entrepreneurship thing, because at that point, I also was like, man, I wish I had just done my own thing. I wish I had just done the entrepreneurship path. I'm tired of asking these gatekeepers for permission to enter their offices, their workspaces, their corporate environments that I know I'm not going to like anyway, and getting rejections from them. I'm so over it. And so I wanted to start talking to people who I admired, who were just doing it. You know how it is when you just want to breathe the air of people because you want to be around those people because that's what you want for your life. They say that life is the sum of the people you're around. And so that's who I was gravitating towards, because I started to see that if I have to go through this for the rest of my life, I will not be a happy woman. Yeah. So at some point I have got to be an entrepreneur. So let me talk to some entrepreneurs.
Right. One thing that I think is really interesting, just based on the story you were just telling, when you start talking to more of those people, very few of them have the kind of cookie cutter life that we were led to believe was the way to go, where you go from A to B to C to D and everything just works out.
Yeah. But with that said, I did end up getting a job finally, December of 2015.
Right, okay.
In between that time, I also did some consulting temp work with MLT. Shout out to MLT holding their alums down. Yep. And so that helped me to have some income before I finally got a full-time offer with NPR, National Public Radio, working as a senior marketing manager there. So I was working on the different programs, including podcasts, marketing them, online marketing across all platforms.
So one thing that's funny about the NPR thing is that I was the only one in our house that listened to NPR before you worked for NPR.
Yes, can we talk about this? I could say this now that I no longer work there. So for that interview, by this time I was also very burnt out of interviewing. So I did not grow up listening to NPR. Maybe it's because for a long time my parents didn't have a car growing up in the city, growing up in the Bronx. So I did not grow up listening to NPR. And when I got the call for the interview, I submitted anyway. But when I got the call, I talked to Muoyo, and I called up my Michigan roommate, Nidia. I was like, tell me everything you love about NPR. And I used some of their answers in my interviews. I was just like, there's no way that I could get all the way caught up in 2 days. So I just got to do my research how I see fit.
But it worked out for you.
It worked out. So worked there started in 2015. And now I think we got to speed this up a little bit.
For sure.
So NPR to now is probably one of the biggest transitions that I had.
Okay, talk about that. But
also you had. So during this time, there have been ups and downs and changes in your entrepreneurial journey. How would you summarize that?
Wow. How would I summarize the changes? So in 2015, I sold my first app portfolio at business. And so that was definitely a big moment. After that, definitely comes a moment where I had to figure out what comes next. I definitely took some time off and just enjoyed it. Started thinking about some different ideas, went into some businesses that didn't work out at all. I started a podcast, which I didn't finish, and found my way back into the app world again. And I'm kind of there currently.
So this, and you can hear more of this on Game of Grow, obviously, when he's going to break it down a little bit more. But there have been twists and turns. There have been ups and downs. I mean, because, we don't want this episode to go on for 3 hours, but to let you know that there was a time when he sold his app portfolio that, he didn't know if he would keep doing apps, right? Like the industry had changed so much. The Apple had made it so much harder for people to market, to get the kind of dollars and revenue that they were used to seeing.
Yeah, it's become a more mature industry. And so I would compare things to like the Wild West when I first started. And it's a lot more mature. It's more sophisticated. There's not as much ability to get traffic for free and just make money the easy way. So it kind of forces you to, lo and behold, you have to build a real business now. So there was definitely an adaptation period. It was not easy, and just kind of getting there now.
Yeah. Getting back into your stride. Because you tested out, there was a time when you were doing like Amazon. Yeah,
worked on Amazon. We actually still have a couple of the wine openers that I was selling.
What's it? Amazon?
Amazon, Fulfilled by Amazon.
Fulfilled by Amazon.
So you can sell just about any goods or service. You can go on Alibaba or, work with a manufacturer in the U.S. or in China. I was working with manufacturers in China to develop my wine opener product. And you just sell it online using different types of advertising.
Right. So we have a lot of wine openers. So, but we've transitioned away from that. And that's something I've had to get comfortable with as a wife, like this wife of a serial entrepreneur. And now that I am potentially going to be a serial entrepreneur, getting comfortable with uncertainty and the unknown and being able to sleep knowing that we are going to find our way, even if there are some ups and downs where it's unclear what the path is moving forward.
Right. And just for everybody, I wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with Amazon or FBA, but my commitment to it wasn't there. It was just kind of like a quick money play, and those generally never work out.
Yes, quick money plays don't work. Which is why, I stayed at NPR for, I didn't stay forever, Fun fact about me, I've also never worked anywhere for more than, a year and a half?
Yeah, something like that.
That's just how the cookie crumbles. That's what I'll say. And so I was at NPR from 2015, December 2015 to December 2017. Okay, so 2 years, look at me. And while I was there, I started Side Hustle Pro. I turned it from a blog into the podcast. And I was so inspired by these women. And I told you I'd already started to get the bug that I want to be an entrepreneur eventually, that my mind was on business. And I want to shout out Michigan and my MBA for this as well, because I wouldn't have this, absolutely would not have had this lens if I didn't go to business school. I just wasn't thinking like that. I was always thinking creatively. I love creating. Like I had a blog before I went to Michigan, but then once I came out and I've met so many amazing people who are going after their dreams. I'm now talking to these women on the podcast. I started to see it more as something that was achievable. And so I started to test out different revenue streams, started to test out different courses, started 6 months into the podcast after growing it and, just focusing on growing the downloads, started monetizing through advertising and did that all on my own, pitching sponsors cold. So saying all that to say, I kind of always had the lens that NPR would be my last job. And the path that it took to get there wasn't easy. I had a lot of doubts. I talked to Muoyo about it a lot because I would come home and sometimes say I want to quit, if I had a frustrated day. And he would say, okay, well, but what are you going to do to make money? And I hated that question because I didn't know what I was going to do to make money until I started to actually do things. That's what you have to do. I started testing out, okay, what would it look like if this was my business model? What would it look like if I start taking on advertisers? Is that sustainable? Can I make enough each month to cover my expenses? And I took it from there until I ultimately was able to get to that point where no, I wasn't making it as much as I would like to, but I said to myself, if I'm making this much on the side, imagine if I do this full time. And I was doing it consistently. So that's when I knew that I was ready to take that leap. And I'd also saved up a bit. So that was what has brought me to my full-time entrepreneurship life. Yeah. And it's been a year of us as dual entrepreneurs. What lessons have we learned in this process?
Yeah, well, okay.
So, what kind of conversations do you think we have the most?
They're very varied. But I want to say, one of the things, I've been really impressed by you over, I'm not just saying that for the podcast, but we really did have those frank conversations where I was expressing to you, okay, like when you leave is going to be like, you really have to be in this. You got to do this.
Yeah.
And you've really done it, I've been impressed by your consistency with the podcast, the way that you deliver for your students and care about them and help them to kind of achieve their goals. And you just really been consistent is the word.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And consistency is big for me because I'm not always the most productive. I'm not always the most motivated, but
those things are true.
Right. But I keep my eye on the goal and I find ways which, gonna plug my goal getter action plan here because it truly is it's truly how I stay focused. And it's truly how I don't get discouraged. When you like really wasted like a couple of days and you feel bad about yourself, having that process of being able to snap back and say, okay, what am I going to focus on tomorrow and today? And then seeing that checklist and having those sprints keeps me focused. But thank you for that because Muoyo, I always say this. I don't think I say it enough, but he inspired me a lot. And the way, in so many ways, when you live with someone, sometimes you take it for granted. You don't even speak it as much because you're just like, it's like osmosis. You're just soaking it up. I see how you move. I see how you operate. Even when I don't want to be that way, right? Like I'm like, I am soaking that up. Like you're responsible with money. I'm responsible with money too, but he's like he can live below his means. Like this man will have like 2 pairs of shoes for like 5 years, whereas I am like, you guys know I like my pedicures, right? So I have learned a lot from you in terms of sacrifice and in terms of focus. When you are buckling down on something, there is nothing else that matters. Not a dish in the sink. Nothing else matters. But I respect that. I respect that more. We used to fight over that, but I respect that. There are times when I used to procrastinate by doing laundry. I would say, okay, I know I need to do X, Y, Z, but I just need a clean space. Right. I'm just gonna do laundry right now. And that was procrastination. If you have work to do, you got to do your work.
Yeah, that's a fact. So I mean, just to that point, I think that I think now we've gotten better at learning things from each other. And there's certain things that you excel at that I don't. And there's certain things that I excel at that you don't. And we're able to fill in those gaps, and it kind of helps us to be a stronger unit.
Yeah, which is why we're ultimately going to work more together now. We're starting something. It's coming, not revealing it yet, but we are building something.
I thought we weren't saying that.
We're not. That's
okay,
it. That's all
right.
we're gonna say. We're building something, and then we do recognize each other's strengths. So the more that I work on, for example, my master classes, I recognize that really, Muoyo really likes digging into the data. How I said I don't love Excel spreadsheets, but he really loves breaking out every single number and saying and just analyzing it 25 different ways. This is what happens over a 5-day streak. And if I put in $1 here, the next month I'll see blah, blah, blah. And so we've learned that, what, why don't you focus on the ads and I just focus on this?
I think what I love the results. So I like looking at like what's going to get us that result. So if it mean a number, it's cool.
I like results too, but like, I'll just look at like the surface. Okay. What was the cost per click? How many people showed up versus.
I think you have a lot of intuitive skills.
A lot of intuitive, yeah. So, thank you for the compliment. And you guys, we're gonna wrap up soon because
we held you for a while.
But we hope this wasn't too rambly, and that it helps you to understand, first of all, who Nikayla is, right? Who she really is as walking you through the journey, and then who the Okome family is, because it's the Okome Family Hustle, and
that's right.
That's the legacy that we're building. I don't know if you heard the podcast interview I did with Essence, but I talk about how
that's a good one.
And this is something that, I credit Muoyo to for how much he has.
Thank you.
No, you've drilled down. You've been so focused on the legacy that we're creating. We don't want our kids to ever have to worry or do without or just struggle. Like, we think about the legacy part of building wealth, building a wealth estate, building our estates,
So and with that, I mean, I can't let things go too far from now without stopping to thank our parents, man. Just thinking about where they came. Like,
that's very true. Like,
my dad grew up in the village.
Exactly.
my mom grew up poor as well, both in Nigeria, and I know your parents came from similar circumstances. Yeah. So it's just amazing to see how far
we talk about that all the time, because it's amazing to see what can happen in 2 or 1 generation. Yeah. Like, imagine what will happen for our kids. Like, my parents, they grew up with that outdoor bathroom in Jamaica, in the country, right? Like, and now we have all these luxuries that we take for granted. Yeah. But that happened in 1 generation, them bringing their kids to the United States. So we're just trying to continue the legacy and
push it to the next level.
Push it to that next level. So follow along on our journey. You can keep up with Muoyo at Game of Grow. And of course, I will continue to check in on Side Hustle Pro. Let me know if you enjoyed this, and I will continue to share more always about my own journey. And with that,
there you have it.
There you have it. Hey guys, thanks for listening to Side Hustle Pro. If you want to hear more from me, head on over to sidehustlepro.co/Side Hustle Corner to get my weekly Side Hustle Diaries chronicles about my own journey from passion project to profitable business. And if you want to find me online, I'm at Side Hustle Pro on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Don't forget to join the Side Hustle Pro Facebook community. Go to sidehustlepro.co/mastermind. And as always, if you love the show, do me a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks, guys. Talk to you next week.